The street lamp flickered, casting a stuttering glow across the cobblestones as Elias Kane clutched his sketchbook tighter, his heart hammering like a trapped bird. He'd seen him again, the man across the street, leaning against that sleek black motorcycle, all sharp edges and quiet danger. Elias didn't know his name, but those piercing green eyes had already carved a home in his dreams. Havenport, a sleepy coastal town in Massachusetts, wasn't the kind of place where secrets thrived. Yet, every evening, as Elias sat on his brownstone steps, sketching the world he rarely dared to join, the stranger's presence felt like a secret only he was privy to. The man never spoke, never waved, just watched, his gaze a brushstroke of mystery that Elias couldn't stop painting in his mind. Tonight, though, something shifted. The stranger's lips curved into the faintest smile, and Elias's pencil froze mid-stroke, his breath catching as if the world had tilted. Elias was no stranger to solitude. At 24, he'd built a life out of quiet moments, his days spent in the attic studio of his inherited brownstone, coaxing life on a canvas with colors that spoke louder than he ever could. His shyness wasn't just a trait. It was a fortress, built brick by brick after years of being the quiet kid in a small town that didn't always understand him. He'd known he was gay since he was 13, but Havenport's conservative undercurrents had kept that truth locked away, shared only with his late grandmother, who'd left him this house and a legacy of unconditional love. The stranger, though, was different. He'd moved into the apartment across the street a month ago, and Elias had been captivated from the first glimpse. Those broad shoulders, the way he moved with a quiet confidence, like he carried stories no one else could read. Elias had sketched him a dozen times, each drawing more daring than the last, though he'd never shown them to anyone. Tonight, as the stranger pushed off his motorcycle and crossed the street, Elias's pulse roared. "Hey," the man said, his voice low, like gravel smoothed by the tide. "You're always out here drawing. What's got your attention?" Elias blinked, his tongue heavy with nerves. Just the street, the light." He gestured vaguely, his sketchbook a shield against his chest. The stranger tilted his head, his smile deepening. "I'm Theo Navarro." He extended a hand, and Elias stared at it for a beat too long before shaking it, his fingers trembling against Theo's warm, calloused grip. "Elias," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Theo's eyes flicked to the sketchbook. "You gonna show me what's in there, Elias?" The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. Elias's heart screamed yes, but his fear whispered no. He didn't know Theo, didn't know why someone like him, all leather and mystery, would care about a shy artist's scribbles. But as Theo's gaze held his, steady and searching, Elias felt something spark, a fragile, dangerous hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real. The next morning, Elias woke with Theo's name on his lips, the memory of their brief exchange burning brighter than the sunrise spilling through his attic window. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying that fleeting smile, the way Theo's voice had wrapped around his name like a promise. By noon, he was back at his easel, painting with a fervor he hadn't felt in years. The canvas bloomed with greens and golds, a dreamlike rendering of Theo leaning against his motorcycle, the ocean in the distance. Elias's art was his voice, his way of shouting when his words failed. But today, every stroke felt like a confession. He painted Theo's eyes with a depth that made his chest ache, wondering what secrets they held. Was Theo just being friendly? Or was there something more in the way he'd lingered, his gaze tracing Elias like he was a puzzle to solve? That afternoon, Elias ventured to the local coffee shop, a rare excursion driven by a restless need to clear his head. Havenport Brew was a cozy spot, all mismatched chairs and the scent of roasted beans. As he sipped his latte, sketching the barista's deft hands, the bell above the door chimed. Theo walked in, and Elias's heart lurched. Theo's eyes found him instantly, as if drawn by some invisible thread. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, sliding into the chair across from Elias without waiting for an answer. Elias nodded, his sketchbook open between them like an offering. Theo's gaze lingered on the page, a half-finished sketch of the coffee shop's window, sunlight streaming through. "You're good," Theo said, his tone warm but guarded. "Really good." "Thanks," Elias mumbled, his cheeks flushing. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions: where Theo was from, why he'd moved to Havenport, what made him tick, but his tongue felt tied. Instead, he pushed the sketchbook closer. "You can look if you want." Theo's fingers brushed Elias's as he took the book, and the contact sent a jolt through him. Theo flipped through the pages, pausing at a sketch of the brownstone street, his motorcycle prominent in the foreground. His brow lifted, but he didn't comment, just kept turning pages until he stopped at a portrait of himself, half-shadowed, his eyes alive with intensity. "You see a lot," Theo said softly, his voice tinged with something Elias couldn't name, admiration, maybe, or caution. "I just draw what I feel," Elias admitted, his heart pounding. Theo handed the sketchbook back, his fingers lingering on the cover. "Careful, Elias. Not everyone's as open as your drawings." The warning hung in the air, sharp and cryptic. Elias wanted to ask what he meant, but Theo stood, tossing a few bills on the table for his coffee. "See you around, artist," he said, and then he was gone, leaving Elias with a racing pulse and a question that burned. What was Theo hiding? Days bled into weeks, and Theo became a fixture in Elias's world, a neighbor who was both present and elusive. They'd exchange small talk on the street, share coffee at Havenport Brew, or sit in companionable silence while Elias sketched. Each encounter felt like a brushstroke, building something vivid yet undefined. Theo was charming, quick with a laugh, but there was a wall behind his smile, a shadow that flickered when Elias asked about his past. "Where'd you grow up?" Elias ventured one evening, sitting on his steps as Theo tinkered with his motorcycle across the street. Theo's hands stilled, his wrench glinting in the fading light. "Here and there," he said, his tone light but evasive. "Moved around a lot." Elias didn't push, but the vagueness gnawed at him. He'd grown up in Havenport, where everyone knew everyone's story, and Theo's reticence felt like a locked door. Still, the more time they spent together, the harder it was for Elias to ignore the pull in his chest. The way Theo's laugh made his skin hum, the way their knees brushed when they sat too close. One night, a summer storm rolled in, thunder rumbling as rain lashed the brownstones. Elias was in his attic, painting, when a knock echoed through the house. He opened the door to find Theo, soaked to the bone, his leather jacket glistening. "Bike broke down," Theo said, grinning despite the downpour. "Mind if I wait out the storm?" Elias's heart stuttered. "Sure, come in." They ended up in the attic, where Elias's paintings lined the walls. Vivid landscapes, quiet portraits, and in the corner, a half-finished canvas of Theo. Theo's eyes caught it immediately, and he stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You've got a gift," he said, his voice low. "But this is like you're seeing parts of me I don't show anyone." Elias swallowed, his pulse racing. "Maybe I just want to know you." Theo turned, his gaze locking with Elias's. For a moment, the world shrank to the space between them, charged with unspoken longing. Then Theo stepped closer, his hand brushing Elias's arm. "You don't know what you're asking for," he murmured, but his eyes told a different story, one of yearning, of fear, of something too big to name. The storm roared outside, but in that attic, Elias felt like he was standing on the edge of something vast, a love that could either save him or break him. Summer deepened, and so did the pull between Elias and Theo. They spent evenings on the brownstone steps, sharing stories. Elias's of his grandmother's warmth, Theo's of fleeting moments from cities he wouldn't name. Each conversation peeled back a layer, but Theo's past remained a shadow, always just out of reach. One afternoon, Elias invited Theo to a local art fair, hoping to share a piece of his world. The fair buzzed with color and sound, booths overflowing with paintings, sculptures, and crafts. Elias's work was on display, and he watched, nervous, as Theo studied his pieces. "These are alive," Theo said, pausing at a painting of the ocean at dawn, its waves shimmering with hope. "You put your heart in everything, don't you?" Elias blushed. "I try." As they wandered, their hands brushed, and Elias's breath caught. Theo didn't pull away, and for a moment they stood there, fingers grazing, the world fading around them. But when a passerby, a gruff older man from town, shot them a hard look, Theo's hand dropped, his jaw tightening. "Something wrong?" Elias asked, his voice soft. Theo shook his head, but his eyes were distant. Just old habits. That night, back at Elias's brownstone, Theo lingered in the doorway, his usual confidence frayed. "I don't do this," he said suddenly, his voice raw. "Letting people in? It's complicated." "Then tell me," Elias urged, stepping closer. "I want to understand." Theo's gaze flickered, torn between fear and longing. "I've been running a long time, Elias. From things I can't outrun." Before Elias could respond, Theo leaned in, his lips brushing Elias's in a kiss that was both tender and desperate. It was their first, and it felt like a confession, a promise, and a warning all at once. When Theo pulled back, his eyes were wet. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and then he was gone, leaving Elias with the taste of secrets on his lips. The kiss changed everything. Elias couldn't paint, couldn't sleep, couldn't think without Theo's touch haunting him. But Theo was pulling away, his visits shorter, his smiles tighter. Elias felt the distance like a wound, and he knew it was tied to whatever Theo was hiding. One evening, desperate for answers, Elias knocked on Theo's door. When Theo answered, his face was pale, his eyes shadowed. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but he let Elias in. The apartment was sparse, almost sterile. No photos, no personal touches, just a duffel bag in the corner that looked ready to go. "Are you leaving?" Elias asked, his voice breaking. Theo ran a hand through his hair, his expression tortured. "I don't know how to do this, Elias. Be us." "Then tell me why," Elias pleaded. "What are you so afraid of?" For a long moment, Theo was silent. Then, haltingly, he spoke. "My name's not Theo Navarro. It's Mateo Reyes. I grew up in Chicago, in a family that didn't accept me. When I came out, my dad kicked me out. I was 16. Elias's heart ached, but Theo wasn't done. "I got mixed up with some bad people. Made mistakes. I've been moving ever since, keeping my head down. Havenport was supposed to be a fresh start, but then I met you," and he trailed off, his voice thick. "You make me want to stop running, but I don't know if I can." Elias stepped closer, his fear drowned by love. "You don't have to run alone." Theo's eyes searched his, and for the first time, Elias saw the boy beneath the armor, scared, scarred, but still hoping. They kissed again, slower this time, and Elias felt the weight of Theo's secrets, but also the promise of something stronger. Fall arrived, painting Havenport in hues of amber and crimson. Elias and Theo grew closer, their days filled with quiet moments, cooking together, sketching side by side, stealing kisses under the stars. But Theo's past was a shadow that never fully lifted. He'd tense at the sound of sirens, glance over his shoulder in crowds, and Elias knew the fear wasn't gone. One night, as they lay in Elias's bed, Theo's head on his chest, Elias whispered, "What happens if they find you?" Theo's body stiffened. "They won't," but his voice lacked conviction. The next day, trouble came. A man showed up at Havenport Brew, asking about a Mateo Reyes. Elias overheard, his blood running cold. When he told Theo, the color drained from his face. "I have to go," Theo said, already grabbing his jacket. "No," Elias said, grabbing his arm. "You said you're done running." Theo's eyes were wild. "You don't understand, Elias. These people, they don't forgive." "Then let me help you," Elias begged. "We'll figure it out. Together." Theo hesitated, torn between fear and love. Finally, he nodded. and Elias felt a surge of hope. They spent the night planning, contacting a lawyer, gathering what little evidence Theo had of his past. It was a long shot, but Elias refused to let Theo face it alone. Winter settled over Havenport, blanketing the town in snow. Theo's past came to light in pieces, a debt owed to dangerous people, a life spent running from mistakes he'd made as a desperate teen. With Elias's support, Theo turned himself in, striking a deal to testify against those who'd once controlled him. It was terrifying, but Elias was there, holding his hand through every step. The trial was grueling, but when it ended, Theo was free, not just from his pursuers, but from the weight of his secrets. He and Elias stood on the brownstone steps, snow falling softly around them, and Theo pulled Elias close. "I don't know how to thank you," he whispered. "You don't have to," Elias said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just stay." Their kiss was a promise, sealed with the weight of all they'd overcome. Theo's past would always be part of him, but so would Elias's love, a love that had seen him, scars and all, and chosen him anyway. As they walked into the brownstone, hand in hand, Elias glanced at the sketchbook on the table. The pages were filled with Theo, his strength, his vulnerability, his truth. And in that moment, Elias knew. Their story wasn't just a beginning. It was a masterpiece, painted with courage, love, and the beauty of second chances.